Please, can we kickstart the lecture now? So we can have the concluding aspect of the corporate governance we are looking at last week.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you. God bless you. So to start with this afternoon, in conclusion of the corporate governance that we are looking at last week, we have a few more things to look at. So we are starting with international code and principle of corporate governance. By this international code and principle of corporate governance, uh, so we are going to look at the reasons for the code and what the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance equally stated as guidelines for board of directors and the information contained. As a refresher, you knew last weekend when we are looking at this corporate governance, I informed us that the essence of the corporate governance is to ensure effective corporate oversight functions and to limit the menace of premature collapse, liquidation, distress, and opportunistic behavior by most of the board of directors, which can ruin the going concern of the company and the investment of the owners. And we mentioned it last weekend too, that this code of corporate governance, we have two types of code of corporate governance. We have the rule-based approach to corporate governance, and we have the principle-based approach to corporate governance. I'm saying this so that we can be able to flow from that place into the second aspect of the corporate governance. So the rule-based approach, we are informed that the essence of the rule-based approach is for companies in Nigeria and across the globe to have a uniform laws and regulations that will guide code of corporate governance and the responsibility of all the directors. So this in turn will improve the confidence of the shareholders, other investors, and then it will limit the misappropriation of the company fund, misappropriation of the company resources, and it will limit the insubordination of interest that most of the directors are perpetrating. So the rule-based approach comprises of some rules, laws that all directors must comply with without violation. Any director that violates that, then that action will be taken to court. But the principle-based approach, we said that one comprises of some flexible principles. And these principles too, they are overseen by the shareholders of the company. That principle base, they are not a replacement to the rule base, but it gives flexibility for corporate organization and upcoming companies. So the principles too are binding. It has zero tolerance. You must not violate any aspect of it. But the benefit of the principle-based approach is that in most cases, the matters are not taken to court. It is the shareholder that supersedes the affair of the issues. And there is opportunity for comply or explain. And we are all aware that last week we said the comply or explain means that the directors must state the reason, explain the reason why you fail to comply with any sections that you violated. So whatever necessary actions that the shareholder deems fit will be taken against the director. At times it can be in form of warning, query, suspension, and some might attract removal of the directors through voting and all other means. So we continue from there by looking at international code and principle of corporate governance. So, but we start with the Nigerian context. The Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance covers similar areas to other national and international corporate governance codes. And some of the issues that the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance discuss and focus on are: one, the role of the board of directors. So the Nigerian Code 2 discuss in depth and critically on the roles and responsibilities of the board of directors. And this code equally stipulates that all the board of directors will be accountable for their roles, responsibility, decision, and power. Secondly, The Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance discusses on the structure and composition of the board. In line with international standard, the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance too discusses on the structure of the board. And there is no exception with Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance and International Code of Corporate Governance, in that company can either use the combination of single board structure and or dual board structure. So later on, we are going to discuss that. It might be today or next lecture. The structure that we can use, single board structure, and we have dual board structure. Also, it discusses about the composition of the board. In the composition of the board must have a balanced composition. And that composition, you must have a balanced gender composition. You must have people of cognate experience. You must have people of different ages, gender, ethnicity. And we must avoid a situation whereby power will be concentrated in the hands of individual or group of individual. So the Code of Nigeria Corporate Governance equally discuss about board meeting and the requirements for the board committee. In a board meeting, the non-executive director, executive director, the chairman of the board, all of them must be duly present in the meeting, unless they have some cogent excuses for not attending the meeting. So the board equally discuss on the committee. Some of the committees that we have in the board of directors are nomination committee, remuneration committee, audit committee, and risk management committee. They are expected to be part of the meeting. Also, the board Code of Corporate Governance in Nigeria discuss on performance evaluation of the board. Performance evaluation, remuneration governance. So the remuneration of the directors and other incentives, reward, performance related benefits, all these ones are stated in the Code of Corporate Governance, and companies are expected to abide with this. Equally, we have risk management and internal auditing. The issue that relates to whistleblowing, and that whistleblowing should be done with transparency and not to winch hunt any directors. Equally, the role and responsibility of the external auditors. These external auditors too must play neutral role. They must not perpetrate collusion with other existing directors in the company for them to defraud the company or to manipulate the financial reporting or narrative reporting. The Code of Corporate Governance equally discuss on the relationship between the board and the shareholders, including the shareholders' rights. So by this, the board of directors have been informed that their responsibility, their objective should be to maximize the wealth of the shareholders. That in interest of the shareholder come first in everything that they are doing, and they must be able to manage the investment of the shareholders effectively. Aside that, they have to avoid or restrain from anything that can jeopardize the investment of the shareholders. Equally, there should be disclosure and engagement with all these shareholders in all strategic issues. And at the same time, they must respect the shareholders' rights and expectations. The business conduct and ethics, there should be ethical standard, and this ethical standard should not be compromised because it might have adverse negative effects on the performance of the company, on the image of the company, and their sustainable growth. So they must not do anything that will soil the image of the company. Sustainability and transparency, they are part of the things that the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance discuss. So in line with this, the International Code of Corporate Governance equally spell out the same matters or issues that the board of directors must abide with. And when you look at this International Code of Corporate Governance, together with Nigerian Code, the intention of the code is to provide guidelines, or a benchmark that will be adopted in all countries. So that's the intention. That means the rationale for the international code and the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, another code that is being used across the globe, is to provide a guidelines or framework, a pathway for a uniform code of corporate governance across the globe, so that we are not going to have this recurring phenomenon of poor corporate governance that ruin investments and create panic for investors. So therefore, we can say conclusively that the essence of the Code of Corporate Governance is that they provide a common standard of governance that should be applied internationally and locally. So these are the examples of the Code of Corporate Governance. The International Governance Network, ICGN. We have the Corporate Governance in the Commonwealth, CHGC. So all of them later we look at it. So the objective of International Statement of Principle or Code of Corporate Governance. So what is the objective? We have mentioned two objectives above: to provide the guidelines or benchmark. So other objective, let's quickly look at it. An International Statement of Principle seeks to establish minimum standard of corporate governance. That's the first objective. For us to have at least a minimum benchmark, minimum standard of corporate governance that should be applied in all countries. The second objective is this: the International Corporate Governance Principle and law aim to raise standards in the worst countries toward the standard that already exists in the best country, so that those countries that they have deficiency in corporate oversight, with this principle of corporate governance, with the rule-based corporate governance, with the international and local code of corporate governance, they can be able to improve, boost their performance to the standard that is expected across the globe. So the benefit of this International Code of Corporate Governance is that it will foster better governance, and which will attract more investment from global and local investors. Apart from that, another benefit is that companies will benefit from more investment finance to increase their profits and expand their portfolio of investments. In addition, the national economy will benefit from having strong and profitable companies, and with that, they can be able to contribute to the gross domestic product, generate revenue to the government, carry out CSR, create employment opportunities. So this objective of ICGN, we have looked at it. This is one example of our International Code of Corporate Governance. We have looked at the objective, and we can quickly brush it. Let's quickly brush it. Objective of our International Corporate Governance Networking, ICGN. The International Corporate Governance Networking, ICGN, is a voluntary association of major institutional investments that operates locally and internationally. And this ICGN that we are looking at, International Corporate Governance Networking, their objective, the aim of the ICGN is to provide corporate governance practices around the world. They want to provide an efficient and effective corporate governance oversight functions across the world, so that we are not going to experience any global financial crisis, any premature death or collapse of any company, and to checkmate opportunistic behavior and misappropriation of the company investments in both local and international. That is the objective. Part of the objective of ICGN is to provide information to stock markets and companies around the world about the issues that investors will take into account. So they are there to give you and keep companies abreast of latest information, developments that will assist them in effective governance and management of their investments. Also, it equally helps investors to participate actively in corporate governance in the company in which they invest. All the investors who will have access to information, that you can be able to scan information in the industry and in the company where they invest their resources, their sweat capital. Another objective is that with this dissemination of valuable information and effective governance, the ICGN believes that this process enables economy to prosper, meaning that it will bring about a viable socio-economic development. And at the same time, it will make the company to be more effective in their competition. It will improve the competitiveness of the company. So having a look at that, what are the content of some of the international code of corporate governance principle? The content are this: one, ensuring the basis for effective corporate governance framework. And when we are talking of effective corporate governance framework, we are talking of the legal framework, the financial reporting and narrative reporting framework, institutional framework, contractual relationship with our vendors, voluntary disclosure, and achievement of results. So the first principle states that principle one, ensuring the basis for an effective corporate governance framework. This simply means that there should be effective corporate governance which require a sound legal practice, regulatory, and institutional framework. So by that, regulatory means that we have to abide with the rules and regulations, ensure that we adhere rigidly to all laws and code of corporate governance. And at the same time, we must have institutional framework, because the institutional framework equally cover the areas of the corporate philosophy, our culture, our ethical standard, the company vision and mission statement. Without all this, there can't be effective governance in the company. So the institutional framework is very, very essential. So the principle one is saying that the corporate governance framework typically must comprise of the elements of legislation, that is legal rules, legislation, self-regulation arrangements, voluntary commitments, and sound business practices. The principle two. The principle two says that the rights and equitable treatment of shareholders and key ownership functions. The principle two reminds us that the shareholders have expectations. The shareholders refer to the owners of the business that found, manage, finance the company. They are the ones that appointed the directors to control the affair of the company on their behalf. As a result of that, their interests should be protected. Apart from the interest, there should be fair treatment, equitable treatment of all the shareholders. The first paragraph. The corporate governance framework should protect and facilitate the exercise of the shareholders' rights. That voting right, the right to vote, the right to for check and balances of excesses of the directors. We can't deprive them of that right. And at the same time, we must ensure the equitable treatment of all the shareholders, including the minority shareholders and foreign shareholders. They should be treated equally. And at the same time, they must have access to information. In some of our strategic decisions, investment decisions, risk management decisions, they have to be informed of all these basic decisions. That is the only way we can create an industrial harmony, business-friendly climate that will minimize agency conflict between the shareholders and the board of the directors. Principle 3. That one discuss on the institutional investors, stock market, and other intermediaries. What are we expected to do? The corporate governance framework should provide sound incentives throughout the investment chain. Incentives throughout the investment chain, and provide for stock markets to function in a way that contributes to good corporate governance. So we have to ensure that all the institutional investors, they have access to incentives, pension fund, insurance policy of the company should equally be sound. So that's the only way you can motivate the directors, motivate the CEO of the companies, motivate the non-executive directors, and all other workers. They must have a good remuneration, incentives, and performance-related benefits. Principle 4 discuss about the role of the stakeholders in corporate governance. Principle 4. It discusses on the role of stakeholders in corporate governance. That means the role of the stakeholders is that you should recognize the right of the shareholders as established by the law. Apart from recognizing the right of the shareholders, there be mutual agreement, consensus of mind. We call it meeting of mind in laws. There should be voluntary agreement on all basic decisions and policy. Nobody should be under duress or undue influence. All major areas of our conflict, gray areas, should be resolved amicably. Anyone that require setting up of committee, a mediation panel to resolve it, all this one will be resolved. Because it is not at all time, and it's not good for the image of the company, that minor crisis or major crisis of the company, this information get out of the company. It rub on the integrity of the company. So therefore, any areas of interest that the directors are interested in should be disclosed. So this will be deliberated by the shareholders. Also, in the areas of employment rights, agreement negotiated for employees with trade union, all these things must be respected. Anywhere there is implementation of changes and we discover that the employees are resisting this change, we can have a collective bargaining meeting with the trade union, representative of the employees and that of the management, and not allow the matter to degenerate to the situation whereby all activities in the company will be paralyzed. The union will go on strike. No. All these things are not good they are symptoms of bad governance in an organization. Principle 5, we have mentioned this times without number: disclosure and transparency. The company's director are expected to disclose all major financial related reporting. They are to disclose all investments, return on investment, return on capital employed, and all other information. And at the same time, they have to be practice what we call openness, transparency. That shouldn't be anything like a hidden agenda. So what are the limitations of international code or statement of principles? The first limitation is this: because the principle apply to all countries, they can only state general principles. Yes, just the general principles that companies should abide with, meaning that they cannot give detailed guidelines or impose any guidelines. Company must have their own structure, guidelines, strategy put in place for them to be able to apply with all these principles. So that means that the code of corporate governance and principles, they are not specific. 2, the main objective of these principles and standards raised in the international code is to raise standard of corporate governance in the worst countries, meaning that they have less relevance for countries where corporate governance standards are above the minimum standard. Well, that is the critique, perception of some scholars that look into this, but I disagree with that, because the essence of this code is to raise the standard, the threshold standard of corporate governance across the globe. They are only saying that in some countries or companies where corporate governance is worst practice, with this code, it can improve their performance to what is expected across the globe. That means the principles serve as a benchmark for raising standard. So it is not peculiar to only countries or companies where they have worst corporate governance practices. Number 3, limitations. Unlike national laws and code of corporate governance, there is no regulatory authority for international statement of principles. So therefore, this principle lack any force. Yeah, I might agree with that to some extent, that Nigeria, we don't have any regulatory authority for international statement of principles. But in companies where they use all these international principles in accordance with the Nigeria Code of Corporate Governance, the rule-based approach and the principle-based approach too. Within the company too, the shareholders and the constituted committee, they are the enforcement agents that enforce all these rules, laws, and principles. And in extreme cases, some of these issues can be taken to court, or it will be decided during the AGM meeting or extraordinary general meeting, EGM meeting, and appropriate sanctions will be taken. So we look at the delegations of power, delegation of power within a company. How is power delegated? Within a company, all powers are given to the BOD. We all know that. The board of directors, they have been empowered, they are appointed to manage, control, regulate, and direct activities in the company. Upon appointment, all powers are given to the board of directors. And these powers must be used for the sole interest of the company and not to perpetrate the interests of the directors. The Nigerian Company Law too states that the power of the company belongs to the BOD, Board of Directors. So knowing fully that the power belongs to the Board of Directors, the Board of Directors in turn now delegates some of this power to executive management. And the essence of this is that the delegated responsibility now will now enable the executive management to do what? To carry out the day-to-day business operations so that we can be able to achieve the broad goals of the company and specific objectives. It should be noted that there are no laws or standard rules about what the role of the board of directors should be or how much authority or power for decision making should be retained by the board and how much of this power authority should be delegated to executive management. So we are saying this because the delegation of power within a company may therefore vary between companies. The degree of power responsibility that is being delegated to subordinates, to executive directors and non-executive directors varies within company. So there is no uniform standard that this is the percentage of power or responsibility that can be delegated. That's what the statement is saying. And we must know that a good director is not the one that do everything by his or herself. You must delegate responsibility for easy achievement of goals, because no individual director can single-handedly work and achieve the broad goals and objectives of the company. Okay, next, we look at Code of Corporate Governance and the role of the board. What are the role of the board of directors? That's our major focus here, and that's what the syllabus required. So in the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, same with International Code of Corporate Governance, the following are some of the roles that the company board of directors are expected to perform. You can look at maybe 5 roles there while we read others. 1, exercise leadership functions, enterprise functions, act with integrity and uphold the goodwill of the company, and judgment in its oversight and control function. That judgment means that we are aware that since they have been empowered to make strategic decisions for the company, to manage and control the company, they enjoy what we call independent judgment. And these are independent judgments. They must use it without bias for the utmost interest of the company and with equity and justice. Anytime they are exercising control over the company investments. And we can look at that same point that we are looking at, that the directors are expected to achieve is continued survival and prosperity of the company. Meaning that under no circumstances should we engage in any activities that can retrogress the performance of the company. We must be a change agent. We must contribute to sustainable growth and existence of the company, profitability, competitiveness. You must not engage in any activities that will retrogress the progress of the company. That's what the statement is saying here. Continue survival and prosperity of the company. Another one is the board of directors should ensure that its committee act in the best interest of the company. I've told you that we have different committees We are still going to have a note and lecture on that later on. Might not be today. Nomination committee, remuneration committee, audit committee, all of them, we have to ensure that all their functions are integrated and there is accountability and best practice. Number 3, role of the board. Ensure compliance with the laws of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and other applicable regulations, including agency laws, CBN directives, BOFIA Act, Bank and Other Financial Institution Act, Stock Exchange laws and regulations. Companies must comply with all laws. The constitutional provisions should be binding. Company law, the laws guiding contracts, all the essential elements of the contract, vitiating elements of the contract, the code of corporate governance, the principle base, everything we must abide, ensure compliance. Another role of the board is to consider and approve the long-time and short-term strategies for the company business and monitoring their implementation by the management. That is remarkable. The approval of the company strategy, be it short-term strategy, long-term strategy. And the beauty of it is that I love there is that we must see to the evaluation of the implementation of this strategy, put in place a control measure, follow up and review of this strategy. Because we must not just implement a strategy and fold our arms. There's possibility that we might not achieve the expected results. Another fantastic one is that the board must ensure the establishment and implementation of succession plan. We have seen some instances whereby some directors, they don't give priority to this succession plan. I could recall one of the past questions in the CIBN, Charter Institute of Bankers of Nigeria, that question centers on one of their director, Pakilode, is the CEO of the company, was a former director that rose to that position of the CEO. As at the time when he was appointed, the company is experiencing retrogressing performance, despite the fact that they have received so many accolades in both local and international. But the major area of deficiency in corporate oversight of this man is that he run an institution without a succession plan, and is equally an autocratic leader. As a result of that, to cut it short, when a man eventually retired, the company was having series of problems because there is nobody to step into his shoe and continue from where he stopped. All because majority of vibrant workers, gifted directors too, and subordinates, he subjected them to mundane functions. Some have been frustrated to leave the company. So we must create a succession plan for the company. And with this succession plan, there is no limit to what the companies can achieve. As one director is going, another one is appointed, and we continue to roll out our strategic plan and achieve results. All that is understood. And then lastly, I think we want to stop there. Well, the director should be accountable to the company, as well as managing the relationship with shareholders and other stakeholders. Our relationship with the shareholders should be intact in order to reduce agency conflicts, minimize agency costs. And how can we build relationship with the shareholders? By ensuring that their investment is well managed, ensuring disclosure, engagement, their dividends is being paid, the company goodwill is maintained, the company is competitive, and at the same time, all the categories of stakeholders that we have mentioned in the past We are still going to do revision on them. All categories of stakeholders: primary stakeholders, secondary stakeholders, internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, known and unknown, narrow and wide stakeholders, legitimate and illegitimate. You can recall all these things that we discussed. All those categories of stakeholders, including the categories of stakeholders that Mendelo told us. Those are the low priority stakeholders, minimum effort stakeholders, keep informed stakeholders, and keep satisfied stakeholders. All stakeholders, including the government, the host community, you must have good relationship with them. So it's by doing this that, yes, the company can be able to achieve its set goals and objectives. Another role of the board of directors is to establish the company risk management framework and monitor its effectiveness. So this one will help us to reduce our operational risks and guide our investment policy. Is that understood? Okay, let's pick one more and we proceed. Another role of the board is providing oversight over information and technology governance. There should be a huge amount of investment on technology. And this technology, it has revolutionized business activities. You can even look at the ongoing war, Cold War between Iran, Israel, and USA. See what technologies are doing. Any company that shy away from investment in technology, all their assets will become obsolete. And they are going to be weak in time of competition. If they continue that way, very soon they will close their shop. But they can't compete. So decision making and monitoring roles. We have mentioned this, that information technology, decision making roles. So the role of the board of directors here is a combination of what? Decision making and monitoring. You can see I'm overstressing this. Why? Because a board should retain certain responsibility. It is not all responsibility that you delegate. In fact, there's some information, business secrecy, that other subordinates, particularly the junior subordinate, must not have access to it. That's the reason why the directors, they must have oath of secrecy. So the monitoring role is very essential because where the board delegates responsibility to executive management, it should do what? It should monitor the performance of the management, because you are going to be accountable for whatever decision that you take. So to monitor it, you must have good information technology networking. You must have strict internal control measures. So this one will enable greater accountability, delegation of duties, and monitoring. So what are the strategic role of the board of directors? We have mentioned it in some of our highlighted bullet point above. The strategic role and management functions of the board of directors. The board is responsible for the overall management of the company or group. So their strategic and managerial function involve the following. You can see that we have mentioned it. One, approving the long-time objective and commercial strategy of the company. Two, approving the annual budget and capital expenditure of the company. And we must ensure that it is one thing to approve the budget, it is another for us to ensure compliance to the budgetary provisions and ensuring that all the money budgeted are efficiently utilized for intended purpose, so that there won't be any sharp practices, diversion of the budget, the money for personal gains. At the same time, there should be oversight of operation. The oversight functions, example is review of performance of the company or group. This should be done periodically. Also, decision about the expanding operation into new product area, new markets. When we are talking of decision about expanding operation, then we are talking of increasing the portfolio of investment of the company. And we must do so only when the investment is profitable and the risk attached is bearable. We must not just take a unilateral decision that, okay, let's embark on a high risk investment. No. You must disclose and engage the shareholders, and all the board must delegate on this to look at the risks and financial implication of that expansion, be it in the areas of new product development or expansion into new geographical markets, or maybe the company wants to diversify its investments. Diversification is not a one-man decision, and it's a very risky decision. So therefore, everybody should be aware of this decision. It should be a collective decision. You can see when Dangote said some couple of months ago that he took the highest decision of his life when he diversified into refinery business. He said up to now, he's here to stabilize, his mind is still up. When I say I didn't be in the refinery business collapse, I was dead. That was the statement he uttered, that I was dead. That because most of the financial institutions locally or internationally too will have taken over all his assets. I mean, he has mortgage, borrow loans here and there. So it is not at all time we take such a decision for the company. We have to look at the barest minimum risks to save our own job too, and not to put the company in a mess. I don't want to mention name here, but we don't know where this our video and slide can go. One of the Nollywood artists also, because I don't watch their movie of recent, I read that some of his assets was taken over by banks, but he used those properties, structures, and some other things as collateral to borrow loan capital for him to shoot and produce a movie. Since maybe the expectation in terms of return was not met, was unable to pay back, the bank take over all these assets that you use as collateral. So we have to be mindful about this. You must not have a short-sightedness about any investment. And that's one reason why you need consultants to look and evaluate the investment decision. Okay, another major thing that the Code of Corporate Governance talks about is the structure and capital. So by this we mean that changes relating to the capital structure of the company, group, or its management and control structure should be deliberated at a board meeting. Also, decision about any changes in the company status, vision and mission statement changes, decision about changes about private company to public company status, It's not a personal decision. The shareholders must be involved, and this must be deliberated by all the board members. And due consultations have to be made on this. We have to look at the legal implications too. So therefore, the financial reporting and control, the directors are expected to engage in approval of financial statements and results of the company, approval of the dividends policy, and this is when policy too must be this AGM. And the new proposed dividends too must be pronounced, and no implementation of that dividends until when the shareholders ratify it during the AGM. In the area of internal control, what are the duties of the directors? They must ensure that there is a sound internal control system and risk management framework. Sound internal control and risk management framework that will enable efficient monitoring in the organization. In the area of contracts, when you are looking at it in contracts generally, the company board of directors must ensure that they abide with all laws guiding contractual transactions, because there is no ignorance in law. All the essential elements of the valid contract, they must be able to know this, and they must not engage in any ultra vires contracts. Ultra vires contracts are contracts that they are not registered for. They must not engage in any voidable, void or illegal contracts. So it is the duty of the board of directors to give approval for major capital projects with what? Strategically significant contracts. Those are viable contracts, profitable contracts. So they give approval of loans and many more. So all these functions of the directors, including delegation of authorities, they are the issues that we have discussed before. We just buttress them. So now, board structure that we made mention of, board structure. So there are two types of board structure. We have one, unity board structure, and we have dual board structure. We have two types of board structure. We have unitary board structure. The unitary board structure, I called it the other time single board structure. It's the same thing. Unitary, single. And two-tier board structure that you are seeing here, that was what I call dual board structure. Hello, I'm so sorry about the interruption in the network. Today's network is somehow, in fact, since morning the network has been somehow. So let's quickly conclude our lecture because other lecture will still unfold now. So the next thing we are looking at is board structure. And I inform you that from the onset of our lecture this evening, I've made mention of this board structure that we are going to discuss about it. But when I was mentioning, I said we have two types of board structure. I could recall vividly that I mentioned single board structure and dual board structure. And I'm informing you, I'm saying it affirmatively now, that the single board structure that I mentioned, it is also called unitary board structure. Another name for single board structure is unitary board structure. And that one that I call dual board structure, another name for it is two-tier board structure. Maybe in case of an exam, you are required to Discuss on your understanding of the unitary board structure and two-tier board structure. It's the same thing as discuss on the single board structure and dual board structure. Hope that clarification is clear. Okay, Mrs. Ifoma or Miss Ifoma, I'm with you. You can ask your question, please.
Sir, my question is the dual board structure, can it also be called bilateral board structure?
Bilateral. Yeah, the word bilateral, yes, is okay. But instead of using string words that are not common in literatures and the rest, you are right to some extent, you are right. But why not use two-tier board structure that the examiner knows or dual board structure? But I can say that's the two words that they might use for their marking guide or marking scheme. But it should always be stated in that marking scheme that the examiners are not expected to adhere rigidly to this marking scheme. That any alternative words or any information that the student give that are correct are not captured by this marking guide should be awarded the correct marks. Is that understood?
Yes, sir.
So you are right. Okay. So the unitary board and two-tier board. So what we are doing here is very simple. It will not take us 3 minutes. In that, before we go further on them, you see the unitary board is also called single board structure. We call it unitary board because that board of directors is not segmented. It is not divided. The division means that both the executive director and non-executive director, their functions are not segregated. It's not divided. The two of them are working together. That is what we call unitary board. We have some companies that are doing that, maybe by virtue of their age and size, or the policy of the company, or peculiarity in their country. They use unitary board. But the most common board that we have is two-tier board. Under the two-tier board that we call dual board, the function of the executive director and non-executive directors are differentiated. So we cannot say conclusively that under the unitary board, both the executive director and non-executive director, the two of them work collectively to perform the management function and supervisory function. Hope you are with me. But when it comes to two-tier board, dual board structure, these functions are segregated in that the non-executive director, they perform the supervisory board function, while the management function are being performed by executive director. That's just the difference. You will understand by the time we proceed further now. Under the unitary board, the supervisory function and management functions are collectively performed by the executive director and NED, non-executive director. But under the two-tier board that we call dual board structure, the function of the executive director and non-executive director is segregated, is divided. The management function is being performed by executive directors, while supervisory function is being performed by non-executive director. Very simple. Okay. Unitary board and two-tier board structure. So we go. In most countries, companies have a unitary board. They have a unitary board. This means that there is a single board of directors. That's the meaning. We call it a unitary or single board because we have a single board of directors which is responsible for performing all the functions of the board. Single board. You don't differentiate them. All of them, they perform the function together. Collective goal setting, collective goal responsibility, collective management, supervisory function. But whereas the two-tier board that we call dual board system in some country, such as Germany and Netherlands, the companies have a two-tier responsibility. And what is that two-tier board? See, a two-tier board structure consists of two board of directors. Two board of directors. The number one is a management board of directors, management board, and the number two is supervisory board. Let's proceed further. The management board is responsible for the oversight of management and business operations. That is leading, controlling, monitoring, management of investment. That's their function. It consists entirely of what? ED, executive director. I've told you. Executive director, and the chairman is the company CEO. So under the two-tier board, the management board comprises of the executive director that provide the leadership role, directing roles, monitoring role, controlling role, management of investment. On the other hand, the supervisory board is responsible for the general oversight of the company, and the management board is consists of what? Non-executive director, and it's specifically done like that for strategic purpose, because you should not allow any clash of interest between the executive directors and non-executive directors. The non-executive directors are given supervisory board so that they can be able to act as check and balances, so that the non-executive directors can be able to serve as a whistleblower for the company. And the non-executive directors, apart from the supervisory board, they are members of the remuneration committee. They are the one that determine the remuneration of the executive directors, their incentives. They play human roles too in the area of recruitment and the rest. All that is understood, please. So we have two types of board structure: unitary board and two-tier board. In the unitary board, we have single board of directors, and all major responsibilities that concern leadership, monitoring, control, portfolio of investment, supervision function, management function is being performed by the single board. The function of the executive directors and non-executive directors are not differentiated. They work together. But under the dual board, the functions of the executive director is management functions, while the function of NED, non-executive director, is supervisory functions. And in case, I think it's been a while that we see that kind of question, not even now that the syllabus of SFM has been reviewed. If they ask you which one is the best, there's no best form of board structure. It depends on the company policy, philosophy, and decision of the shareholders. Unitary board is good. Two-tier board is good. So what are the advantages of a two-tier board structure? Two-tier board structure. One, it separates two different roles for the board. And what are the two different roles? One, the management board is responsible for operational issues, and this one will be performed by who? ED, executive directors. Whereas the supervisory board is to monitor performance. And you should remember that the supervisory board, this one comprises of non-executive directors. So another advantage of the two-tier board, dual board structure, is that it is an appropriate structure for a company that recognizes the interests of different stakeholders group. It's a good structure, having management board and having supervisory board. So it's very good. Number three advantage, the legal duty of non-executive directors on the supervisory board can be different from the legal duty of executive directors on the management board. Why? Because, the non-executive directors, I'm still going to give you a note probably next weekend. The non-executive directors they are not full-time staff of the company. Majority of them are employed for a terminal tenure, and they are part-time staff. So they cannot collect the same robust salary like the executive directors. In fact, in some instances, the non-executive directors don't collect incentives. They are not incentivized like the executive directors that will give them access to the company, uh, uh, private jets, changes their cars every 2 years, performance-related benefits, and many more. And to avoid conflicting interests, superiority complex, the board of directors, they ensure that the executive directors are well placed than the non-executive directors. And under the law, their functions are quite different. What are the advantages of unitary board? Unitary board, that is a single board, whereby the non-executive director and executive director, they perform the same function together. The first advantage, unitary board can be small in size because there is no requirement to appoint directors who represents stakeholders interest group. You can see they all work together. Second advantage is that in a unitary board structure, it is easier for the non-executive directors and the executive directors to work cooperatively. The two of them work together to achieve collective goals of the company. As a result, we can say in conclusion that third advantage, unitary board work towards a common purpose. They work towards a common purpose. This will not bring a sort of a misunderstanding, role conflicts between them. They work towards a common purpose, which is what the board consider to be the best interest of the shareholders and others. So having looked at that, we look at composition of the board. Composition of the board. When I am saying board, you should know that composition of the board of directors. Composition of the board. So what are the composition and size of the board? What does the law say? The company law. The board is responsible for the long-term success of the company. We have stated this. And all their responsibility, we have spelled it out. So the composition of the unitary board of a company in many countries comprise of this, including Nigeria. Composition, we have a chairman, and that chairman, who may be an executive director, but in most instances, the chairman is not an executive director. And I've told you the reason, it's for check and balances. The non-executive directors, they are the eye of the shareholders. They are there to protect the interests of the shareholders, to give them valuable information and act as a whistleblower. So sometimes we might have a deputy chairman. Another composition is that we should have a CEO, Chief Executive Officer, who is an executive director. And at the same time, we can have other executive director. And most importantly, you must have a non-executive directors. That's what the law says. And in accordance with that word composition, look at this. The board and its committee should have the appropriate what? Balance of skills, experience, independence, and knowledge of the company. And nobody should have a concentrated power in his hand. All portfolio and responsibility should be evenly distributed. Also, to have a balanced board, all directors should be able to allocate sufficient time to the company. You must be committed. We don't have diluted commitment. You must be committed, you must be loyal. You must prioritize the company. That's the reason why we say that you must have sufficient time, allocate sufficient time. Not that we are going to have emergency meeting or the normal meeting at all time you want to use prosy or start giving excuses. No. So the board of directors too should have a minimum benchmark. It should not be too bogus and should comply with the laws. Okay, so if that is taken, we have to comply with the laws, and you must have sufficient time for the complaint. So executive and non-executive director that we mentioned here, I've told you that the executive director supersedes the non-executive director, and they are full-time staff of the company. They are the one that is managing the portfolio of investments of the company, and all their salaries should conform with industry standard. Apart from that, the ED that you are seeing, executive directors, they are the ones that serve as the lubricants that weigh the investments and the company towards achieving their set goals. So as a result of that, all these executive directors, the company owe them a lot of respect, and they should be given performance-related benefits in most cases for us to be able to retain them. Majority of the executive directors, we have some, they call them CEO, finance directors, and many more. And the executive director, we said, they are the ones that perform the management function under the dual board structure. The non-executive directors, they are part-time staff of the company, and they assist in the oversight function, which is the supervisory function. So you should know the non-executive directors, they are not full-time of the staff, and when they are appointed in some company, they might have calculated the tenure that the directors will use, so that immediately the tenure of the director finish, the non-executive directors tenure too equally end with that of the directors. So in some companies they have it like that their tenure ends with that of the directors. And being a non-executive director, you must be able to protect the interests of the company and not performing that role in another company. You must not perform that role in another company. And non-executive directors too, they must ensure that they avoid what we call internal collusion with the executive director to defraud the company. No, it's against the law and it's punishable under the law. So we have those people that we call independent directors. So the independent directors, they are the directors that under the law to assist in resolving conflicts in the company. And they must not have, look at this, independent directors. The law says that they must not have any link to a special interest group or stakeholders group in the company. But when you look at it in practice, all these things are theory. There are a lot of people that they are appointed as independent directors that we too know that they have a link with the owners of the company, some of the major investors, and then the CEO of the company. But in major practice, that is what the law stipulates. But people are violating these functions. So in Nigeria, an independent director is defined as a non-executive director who is not a substantial shareholder in the company. Who is not a substantial shareholder in the company. That's what the Nigerian law states. Number two is not a representative of shareholders who is able to significantly what? Influence his decision or use him or her against the company. Number three, such individual has not been employed by the company or has served in any executive capacity in the company before. So that person will not have so much of influence in the board of directors, or will not be able to use other board representative against the company. And the law says that independent director is not a member of the immediate family of an individual who is or who has been employed. So these are some of the things that the law states. So we have board balance. I've told you the meaning of that board balance without wasting time is that the board of directors should be balanced in terms of composition, size, and diversity. And when we are talking of the diversity, it means that the board should be diversified. It must have a gender balance. It must have gender balance, male and female, different ages, ethnicity, qualification, education, different religion, and languages. These are the people that should be comprises of the board. Well, so when we are talking of a board balance too, a board should consist of directors with a suitable range of skill, experience, and expertise. And at the same time, that board should have both executive directors and non-executive directors. So examples that we have here in Robert Maxwell, we can look at it. I'm going to send the slides, the material to our platform. This Robert Maxwell, there is no board balance there. As a result of that, the company, the CEO that we call the Robert Maxwell, was able to mismanage the resources of the company. The guy will say that he's using the resources of the company to finance another company. And in a way, he's jeopardizing the growth of the company. And later on, when the company begins to have problems, when Robert Maxwell died, we discovered that he has used about 900 pounds in terms of millions, 900 million pounds was misused, all because there is no board balance. He's the only one taking decision on the company. So he run the company in a way that the company become financial insolvent and bankrupts. As a result of that, we are saying that such situations should not reoccur in any part of the globe. We should have a balanced board that comprises of executive director and non-executive directors and people with different age, gender, ethnicity, and the rest. And that is what we call board diversity. You can see here, I've told you, I've said everything all. What is board diversity? In simple terms, diversity means having a range of many people that are different from each other. These categories might include different age, different race, gender, education, background, professional qualification, experience, personal attitude, marital status, this one escaped my mind, single, married, and rest, and religion. So the board diversity aims to cultivate a broad spectrum of demographic attitude and characteristics. So, and that's the more reason why we have the likes of David's report that is saying that there should be 25%. Some is saying 13% inclusion of female gender in the board, because they discovered that most board is being preoccupied with male. And from the look of things, I too have personal experience. Don't let me mention the company. I've been there about 2 or 3 times. I discovered that majority of their board, even my own personal person that I know there is about 72 years now. And some are older than that. What are you going to give youth opportunity to govern? 72, 75. These are the implications of all this, the government policy that they are extending the retirement benefit, even in tertiary institution, to 70 to 75 and the rest. It's killing. And it doesn't give opportunity for youth to showcase their talent. And you now discover that you are not even helping them at that age. They are less productive. So we can't rule out experience. If us come to work, they can act as consultant, external consultant to the company. external consultants. So all these things is killing. And these are the things that we are talking about, having a board balance. It should not just be a showcase of Hausa or only Yoruba or Igbo. No, that board must be diversified. So what are the benefits of board diversity? Diversifying the board should have the following benefits. One, more effective decision making. More effective decision making. Because there are many different experience, different exposure, different backgrounds. Some come from academics, some from industry, some from the banking industry, many areas across the globe. They've seen it all. So they'll be able to give an enriched decision that is superior than just individual decisions. So that their decision will be robust. Two, better utilization of talent pool for non-executive directors. Yes, there'll be better utilization because already we have different candidates that occupy that position. And majority of them will now be able to bring their accumulated years of experience for the betterness of this company. So they will bring a positive, significant impact that will enhance the growth of the company. So what are the disadvantages of board diversity? One, increased conflict and friction, which may promote clue. We can't rule out that. And you can see most of the scenarios that we are seeing in the House of Representatives, House of Senate. So by the time we have 2, 3, 4 people, there will be differences in perceptions. But that notwithstanding, we argue to agree on what and what should be the policy or decision of the company that will move the company forward. And also, it's caused what we call tokenism. Tokenism. That tokenism means that the minorities or the young ones that doesn't have much experience, when they are with some of the strong board members, they might not really have some says. Even when some make vital contributions or argue bluntly on some issues, they can try to brush him down. That as at the time when you are talking, I've been the group managing director in Johnson and Wales in America before I moved here in Nigeria in 1964 to be among the fourth generation of the ministers that was appointed. You know, so the minority, that's inferiority complex at times occur in the board. But that notwithstanding, all young members, irrespective of the gender, that are appointed to be part of the board, for them to have a diversified board, they must allow their voice to be heard. They must not allow anybody to suppress or victimize them. So their own contributions too is vital. So this is where we are going to end our lectures this evening. I'm very sorry that we started late because of the network, and I thank God that we are able to achieve this. So hopefully by next week we are going to have the second version of the corporate governance lecture. But we still have some areas that the syllabus says that we should look at. I want us to finish this in on time so that we can be able to review what we have done, do revision before our mock exams, and we can be able to do a sort of pre-test on some of these topics that we have treated. So questions will be there. You are going to have opportunity to attempt all these questions, and we look at them together. But what we just have to do is that we must not over concentrate on numeric subjects alone. Even the numeric one too, we have to ensure that we start reading now. When you look at it, we should be counting per weekends, because tomorrow, by Monday now, you'll be at work. Monday to Friday, you are at work. Saturday to Sunday, you are preoccupied with lectures from morning till evening. No time. There's no work balance. Even our family are feeling it. But it's investment that are worth it. Very soon, by the time we qualify now, we are going to feel a lot of relief. And this certificate will bring so many tremendous opportunities that will position us to greater heights. So in so doing, I encourage us that we start reading now. We read prior to exam, not when the exam is closer. That's the time we are now forcing the brain. This is 2 hours you can spend in a day. Just read it. 2 hours you can read it. If you want to wake up very early or late night before you sleep, it's 2 hours you want to devote, you look at it. So going forward, the brain, the eyes, and everything will start mastering all these things. So I wish you best of luck in the forthcoming exam. God will crown your effort with success.